Hello and welcome to today's lesson. We're going to create the header and the navigation menu of our website. Here you can see our design opened in Photoshop. Let's start with coding the header. The header includes a navigation menu and a search box. First we'll create the background. Then we'll be able to see proportions of the whole header. I'll switch to Code Editor and create a div element. Next I'll add an ID attribute and set the value to header wrapper. Imagine that this is an imaginary container that wraps around the whole header. HTML structure is now finished. I'll switch to the style sheet and create an identifier selector called header wrapper. I'll also paste some properties. As you can see, I've set up dimensions, padding, and a gray background. Let's view the result in a browser. I'd now like to replace the gray background with a color gradient, which you can see in the design. To achieve the gradient effect in a browser, we'll use a picture. First, find the right layer. Next, use the duplicate layer function to paste the layer into a new document. Using the Ctrl+ shortcut, zoom the picture until you can see individual pixels on the top ruler. Next, select the Crop tool by pressing the C key. It's always better to crop the image since it reduces the file size. Also, the size of transmitted data won't be as big. I'll confirm everything by hitting Enter. Next, I'll show you the best way to save the file. Click the File option in the top menu and select Save for Web. Web graphics should be always saved through this option. We don't need to change any settings. Just be sure that the PNG24 option is selected in the drop-down menu over here. Save the file in the Images folder as header_bg.png. Now that the image is ready, let's use it in the website. First, switch to the style sheet. To use the image as a background, we'll need to change the background property. Type URL, brackets, and quotes. The location of the image we want to use must be in quotes. It's important to visualize how our folder structure looks. To set the location correctly, we have to return to the root directory. We can easily do this by adding 2 periods. Next, just navigate to the Images folder and type the name of the file, then add the background repeat property and set the value to repeat-x. This ensures that our small picture will repeat horizontally until it fills the whole surface of the div element. Here's a simple demonstration of how the background repeat property works. Let's look at the result. You can see that the header background is now really created by a color gradient. Because the width is set to 100%, the background will always stretch through the whole width of the screen. The content area, however, has a fixed width of 960 pixels. I'll now insert a new content div into the wrapper div. Notice the indentation. That will make orientation in the document much easier in the future. I'll switch to the style sheet and paste a corresponding CSS code. The most important thing here is that the margin property is set to 0 auto. This line of code ensures that the content div will always be centered. Let's move on and create menu items. The best way to do this is to use an unordered list. Create an UL element and add a nav identifier. We'll use this identifier in the style sheet to refer to the navigation. Next, I'll paste individual items. Note that each item is enclosed in an A element. Now that the links are finished, let's look at the result in a browser. As you can see, at this point the navigation menu doesn't look too good. We'll have to use CSS to make it look exactly like it did in the graphic design. I'll switch to the style sheet and use a shortcut to paste 2 new selectors. The NAV identifier selector affects the whole UL element. Using the float property, I'll push the element to the left. We do this because we'll also need to add a search box to the same horizontal level. The NAV LI selector affects only those LI elements that are within the menu. Next, I'll paste a couple of other properties and their values. The float property set to left ensures the items will organize horizontally. We'll also use the padding and margin properties to adjust the space around each item. After viewing the website in a browser, we can see that the result is a bit better. In the final stage, we'll be styling links. First, I'll paste a corresponding CSS code. Because of the NAV selector, the CSS rule will only affect the links in the header, not in the whole document. It's good to use pseudo classes to keep the best control over links' behavior. Below, you can see text formatting properties that you're already familiar with. Step by step, we set the color, text decoration, size and weight of the links. However, we'll need to focus a bit more on the text shadow property. It was first introduced in CSS3 and allows us to shade text. I'll show you how the value of this property works. The first number sets a horizontal shift of the shadow. The second number sets a vertical shift. The third number sets the blur amount. Finally, a color is selected. Let's view the website in a browser. Now we can see that the result is nearly identical to the sample design. All we have to do now is set a different font and create a blue rounded rectangle. We won't set the font just for the navigation, but for the whole document. First, place the cursor at the beginning of the document. Next, type body and add a pair of curly brackets. This selector matches any single element inside the body element. Add the font family property and set the value to Trebuchet MS. Refresh the website and take a look at the result. The very last thing to do is create the blue rounded rectangle. This rectangle indicates an active menu item. After switching to Code Editor, notice that the first menu item uses a class called Active. Switch to the style sheet, paste a corresponding selector and two properties. The background property sets the background to dark blue. However, the border radius property is much more interesting. I'll use this property to set the roundness of the corners. 10 pixels seems all right to me. Let's refresh the website and take a look at the result. We can see that the item using the active class is highlighted with a dark round rectangle. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll look forward to seeing you the next time.